Right. So we start now. Hi everyone, I'm Sudeshna from theabundancepsyche.com. If you are new here, my website is theabundancepsyche.com and I help people find their dream careers and to be their best selves. I also work in my day job as a full-time corporate employee. I have a couple of degrees in economics and I'm especially interested in behavioral economics and hence psychology. Today, I'm joined by my very special guest, the very talented Dr. Emee Vida Estacio. Dr. Emee is a chartered psychologist and the founder of the PAME Code. She is the #1 best-selling author of Psychology in Your Life book series, including titles such as The Imposter Syndrome Remedy, Change Your Life for Good, and Fear is Not My Enemy. She is also now helping aspiring authors fulfill their lifelong ambition to write and publish their own books with her flagship course, Self Publishing Made Simple. Dr. Emee's books are available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. If you are watching this on YouTube, I'll link the uh, books below. If you are live, I'll share the links at the end of this chat. Emee, I'm so excited to have you here. I love learning about psychology. I love what you are doing to make it more accessible to the common people. Some people historically have an idea of psychology being a subject for the doctors to treat the crazies. And these days, I think psychology gets talked about only in the context of mental health, but it's just so much more. And you have shown that to us by turning things on their heads and given us practical solutions to the real life problems. So, do you want to tell us a bit more about your work?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to actually be able to talk about psychology and how we can apply it in our day-to-day lives. That's actually one of the reasons why I wrote my books. I've been in psychology, in the field for more than 20 years now. But I've always had this inkling that I'm not doing enough to share what I know in psychology. Most of the time, I'll just be within the four walls of the university, teaching at the university, talking to other researchers, talking to other psychologists. But there's so much that psychology can offer in terms of how we manage our emotions, our thoughts, and ultimately how it impacts on our decisions and our behavior and relationships with other people. So there's so much that we can use psychology for. My books, Psychology in Your Life series, I wrote that to be able to share what I know in psychology, not just in an academic perspective. Obviously, all the theories and all the foundations of psychology will be there, but I wrote it in such a way that the readers will be able to apply it in practice. And especially for today, we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. I wrote Imposter Syndrome Remedy because I've noticed that there are so many early career professionals right now, or professionals in general, who feel as if they are frauds, that even if they are good at what they do, even if they are qualified and experienced at what they do, they still feel as if they're not good enough, or they're not expert, or that they're not expert enough. And they are worried that people are going to find out that they're just fooling everyone into believing that they what they do is they actually do well in their job, when they actually really do.
So,
So
basically, like imposters, right?
that's right. They feel as if they are imposters when in fact they are not. They feel as if they are frauds because they feel as if they are not good enough, they are not expert enough. But the truth is they are. They just couldn't see it themselves.
Right. So, tell me a bit more about why it's important right now, especially as we are in this lockdown. You were telling me a bit about, of course, professionals, but also as parents, as partners, as daughters, sons, everyone. Like, it's so different.
Yes. If I could just say, with when it comes to imposter syndrome, it's that persistent feeling of self-doubt and incompetence, despite the fact that you are actually good at what you do. And what happens is, for example, here in during lockdown, we are wearing a lot of different hats. You are wearing the hat of a wife, for example, if you're married, or as a mother, as a as a parent. And if you are still working from home, you are also still wearing your hat as a professional.
Mm.
But when it comes to imposter syndrome, you have this self-doubt that you're not doing, you're not good enough at what you're doing. And when you are confronted with new tasks, so for example, now that we are homeschooling as parents, you feel as if you're not qualified to do this because it's a new task. Surely there are other people who would do a better job than you do. Or if
Mm.
you are an early career professional, or even if you have been in your job for a long time and you
Mm.
are given a new responsibility. So, for example, now you are learning technology and how to work from home. You feel as if you're incompetent, that you're not good enough, without
Mm.
realizing that you have transferable skills, that
Mm.
and even if you are struggling right now, even if you are new at something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a fraud. It just means that you are new at it. So
Yeah.
the thing with imposter syndrome is that if you're not able to recognize that there are certain stages of learning, and if you're beating yourself up too much when you are beginning to learn a new skill or a new task, or even if you've been doing it for a long time, you still feel as if you're not good enough, that then that's when it can have a problem. It can cause lack of job satisfaction, for example, because even if you're doing a good enough job, if you cannot see that what you do is good, then the satisfaction is lost. Or for some people who experience quite severe signs of imposter syndrome, because of their self-doubt, they push themselves too hard, thinking that, okay, I know that I am not good at this. And if I don't work 60 hours a week, if I don't push myself and bend over backwards to show that, that I can do it, then I'm going to fail. So they end up working extremely hard, burning themselves out,
Mm.
getting all stressed out. Eventually, they will accomplish what they need to accomplish. But at the
Mm.
back of their minds, they would say something like, it's not that I am good, it's not that I am competent. It's just that I really overstretched myself. And if I didn't do that, then people will find out that I'm incompetent.
Yeah.
So you're never gonna win. That even if you are achieving what you need to achieve, you're still not getting the sense that you're doing a good job, because at the back of your mind, that feeling of self-doubt and incompetence is still there. And it
Yeah.
can reflect in so many aspects of your lives, your role as a parent, as a partner, as a professional. It's all the same feelings of self-doubt that would be, for some people, can be crippling, and really has its toll on your emotional well-being. It can have its toll on your physical well-being as well, because if you're burning yourself out, and it
Yeah.
can have an impact on your relationships as well, because if you are showing signs of self-doubt, it will reflect. People will see that. And sometimes people don't really respond very well when people behave this way. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why you need to be aware, if you do experience imposter syndrome, and you need to be able to manage it effectively. Ultimately, it's very common. 70% of us will experience imposter syndrome at some point in our lives. It's very human to doubt ourselves from time to time, but
Yeah.
you just need to be able to manage it well, to be aware of it, so you can cope with it and not really paralyze you, or cause you too much
Yeah.
emotional distress.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. 70% of us will probably go through it. So what makes us realize that this is probably an imposter syndrome, as opposed to, well, I probably should be actually studying a bit more and I really am an imposter. So
All
what's the
right.
fine line?
Yes, yes. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to imposter syndrome, one of the strategies that I teach is called the TLC questioning sequence. I'll talk about that in a little while,
Mm.
because you don't really want to be in denial that you are in fact at an early stage of your career, or maybe you do need to develop some skills and knowledge
Mm.
and so on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are an imposter. So we'll talk about the
Okay.
TLC technique in a
Okay.
little while. But the symptoms of imposter syndrome is that first, they have this denial of competence, that when they do a good job, they cannot really internalize it. They would always attribute it to external factors. So
Luck.
for example, yes, I just got lucky,
Yeah.
or people are just being nice to me, or
Mm.
when people make a big deal of what you're doing, I would say something like, I don't understand what's the fuss. It was easy. And they're making a big deal out of it without realizing that what's easy for you may not be easy for everyone, because
Right.
it's easy for you because you are actually qualified, you have training, you have experience, that's why it's easy. But for those who experience imposter syndrome, they don't understand why people are making such a big deal out of what you're doing, because for you it's too easy, but for
Mm.
the others it's like, oh my goodness, she's so good, but you cannot really see. That's why they feel like a fraud even more. Those who have achieved huge accomplishments in their careers, they're getting awards and recognition, and they feel as if like, I don't get it. I
Mm.
don't sooner or later they're gonna find out that I'm a fraud. So because of the self-doubt. So that's one of the main characteristics of imposter syndrome. It's that inability to internalize success. It's the inability to internalize your competence, and it's the denial of your competence. The second characteristic is that people with imposter syndrome tend to exhibit maladaptive perfectionist tendencies. Now, when we talk about perfectionism, we need to understand the difference between adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism. Adaptive perfectionism is okay because you do something, you review your performance, and then you look for ways to improve it, so the next time it will become better. So
Mm.
that's adaptive perfectionism. It's doing something in the road to perfection. You're trying to polish what you're doing, and doing things better the next time. That's absolutely fine. When it comes to maladaptive perfectionism, that's when you do something and you cannot recognize the good things that you've done. That even if you've done 99.9% to perfection, you're fussing yourself out and stressing yourself out to the 0.1% that you did wrong. So for
Mm.
example, in my case, I'm delivering this interview, and I'm giving value, but all I could focus on is the time that I stuttered, or the time that I forgot some words. And instead of recognizing that there are things that you have done well, you focus on the trivial things, the flaws that people don't even notice. You lose sleep over it, and you stress out over it, and it takes out the joy and the satisfaction of doing something well, because you cannot see it. So those are the two main characteristics, the denial of competence and maladaptive perfectionist tendencies. And as I've mentioned earlier, it's this feeling as if you are a fraud,
Mm.
and being worried that people are going to find out eventually that you're just faking it.
Yeah, and tell me if I'm wrong, but this also could lead to us not providing the value that we are holding together just because of that 0.5% that we think we don't know, and we are holding a ton of value and just not sharing it with others, um, and therefore actually being completely useless
Yeah, that's actually
and
one of the ways. I wouldn't say the ways people cope, because that's not
that's
really
not
an
coping.
effective coping strategy, but
Mm.
that's one of the ways people respond to imposter syndrome. So that's why it can be quite detrimental to your career. It can be quite detrimental to your growth, because one way to respond to imposter syndrome is to run away from opportunities for growth, because there is a risk. Okay, there is a risk that you might fail, there is a risk that you might lose face, but that's just how it is sometimes. But for those with imposter syndrome, they would rather not take that risk, because if they do and if they fail, they are worried that people are going to find out that they are frauds.
So,
So
so
you're
basically, sorry, I'm just interjecting because I think this is fascinating. So basically, what you are saying is the imposter syndrome somewhere stems because of our fear of failing and fear
That's
of
right.
looking a bit silly on the internet or in front of our parents or children or so is there a specific place from where all of this fear arises, and is there something we can do to kind of nip it in the bud, or for our children especially, not get them down that path of high expectations so that we feel
Sure,
like
sure.
imposters?
Well, yesterday I was talking about, I told you, I delivered the webinar with the Chambers of Commerce about fear, actually. We were talking about fear, amidst a COVID-19
Mm,
pandemic. But when we talk about fear, I talked a little bit about the fear of ego death. That's actually one of the universal fears that we have. It's not necessarily the fear of physical death, but it's the fear of losing face, the fear of humiliation, the fear of failure. And this is
mm,
something that is one of the underlying fears that underpin imposter syndrome. And when it comes to remedy, to remedy this, it's about developing a growth mindset. We talk
mm,
about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. The fixed mindset is when you think that there are very fixed traits or skills or knowledge that you might have, and that's about it, really. So for some people with the fixed mindset, they might say something like, I'm not good with math, I'm just really bad with numbers, as if you cannot learn
mm,
how to be good with numbers, as if it is a fixed trait. So with a fixed mindset, you are limiting yourself to those particular to that preconception, as if all of your traits and skills and knowledge is fixed. For those with a growth mindset, they're actually more open to opportunities to learn and to grow, and in association with that, they are willing to take risks, because with learning, there are risks of making mistakes. But when you make mistakes, that's actually when you learn that that is a mistake, so you can
yeah.
actually improve the next time. So when it comes to this fear of failure, this fear of making mistakes, it's really about adopting a growth mindset. And in schools right now, if I'm talking to teachers, for example, it's encouraging kids to make mistakes. It's okay. Experiment. If you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can
Yeah.
actually learn from that and grow from that. So they could recognize that, okay, I could test this out. If I make a mistake, it's okay. I'll just try again and try again and try again
Yeah.
until you actually perfect it.
And to
For
borrow
me,
from, I guess, Silicon Valley, they say the fail fast attitude. So fail
that's
fast,
right.
and therefore you'll do so much more that you end up creating the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, or Zoom, for
That's
example.
right. You just keep you keep testing, you keep testing, see what works, see what doesn't work. If it doesn't work, at least you know that it doesn't.
Yeah.
So if I can just share my background, actually, I came from the Philippines and I came from a non-traditional school. Our school had a non-graded system. We didn't have exams, we didn't have grades, which is a little bit weird. But the
Mm,
way we learned is we learned at our own pace. We read, we studied the modules, and whenever we are ready, we test our skills, right?
yeah.
We even check our own, we correct our own performance. We take the answer key
Yeah.
and check if we
Yeah.
actually did well or not. And if we make mistakes, we cannot move to the next module until we actually master that particular module. So we learn at our own pace. You have set A. If you fail set A because you haven't mastered it, don't worry. Take another set B, set C, set D, until you actually learn from your mistakes and you
Yeah.
move on to the next module when you've mastered the first module, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's learning at your own pace without without grades, because yeah, you keep making mistakes, but from the mistakes you're actually learning that that's not quite right. Okay, next time I test myself again, then I'll try to not make the same mistake again. And sometimes I end up getting set J, for example, because
That's fascinating.
I still haven't mastered, and I kept repeating and repeating and repeating until I finally master that particular lesson, and then I move on to the next when I master it. So I'm actually grateful that I was in that school. We had some issues when we had to apply for university because we didn't have grades.
Yeah.
But as far as learning was concerned, as far
Yeah.
as having a growth mindset was concerned, it encouraged us to be curious. When
Yeah.
you have a problem, there is actually a solution to it. You have to find ways, and you can keep testing and trying. If it's a mistake, it's fine. Try again and try again and try again.
That's fascinating. So what is this sort of education called? Is it something that we could think of borrowing more
I'm not
societally
sure if it
globally?
is called anything. I just remember it's called Angelicum College. That was what the
Okay,
school was called, but it's just a non-graded system.
I see.
We just learned. We took modules. We learned at our own pace. We corrected our own tests, if you like. We take the answer key, and it was an honesty principle.
Yeah.
You mark your own stuff, and
And
until
yeah. And
yeah,
I
and
suppose
you master
comparing
it, you move to the
yourself
next.
only to yourself as opposed to comparing yourself to the 15 other kids in the same class, which in itself is so liberating in some ways because I only have to beat me and
Oh,
not.
yeah. Well, I have to say there were limitations to that because there were some students who were racing.
All right. Okay.
So
There will,
who gets
yeah.
to finish the. So for example, I do remember when I was in second year in high school, I finished one class, like the whole year's worth of religion class,
Hmm.
in 2 weeks.
Right.
Because yeah, it was sort of philosophy. It was like the doctrines of the church and so on. So I just read it, understood it by memory, took the tests, got it done. So it was 2 weeks worth of work, well, 1 year's worth of work that I finished in two
In two
weeks
weeks. That's amazing.
So
Yeah.
that happens sometimes, and there are some students who do take their time, and yeah, so they didn't finish high school in 4 years. They ended up finishing in 5 years, but it's learning at your own pace, and having that mindset that you can actually you can actually learn and learn from your mistakes, and master, and then move on to the next. So
Yeah.
for me, having a growth mindset is really important. But when it comes to imposter syndrome, one of the things that I teach in my books, I mentioned earlier, is called the TLC technique. The TLC questioning sequence. And what it does really, it's asking you to recognize your inner critic messages. So if you are telling yourself, I'm not good enough, or if you're telling yourself that I'm a failure, what I would say is you use the TLC questioning sequence. Some self-help gurus will ask you to crush your inner critic, to ignore it, to banish it, to have a fight with it. But what I would say is you actually need to recognize your inner critic, and treat it with a bit of compassion, because ultimately your inner critic is a voice inside your head.
Mm.
If you try to crush it and have a fight with it, you're essentially having a fight with yourself. You're just going to hurt yourself. So, what I would say is acknowledge your inner critic message, acknowledge that the thought is there, and use the TLC questioning sequence. And what it does is it encourages you to ask 3 questions, right? You have to ask, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? Because when you do that, it gives you it allows you to explore the message. It acknowledges that it exists, and then you can also do a reality check to ask if it is true, if it is logical, if it is constructive. So if you're telling yourself, I'm not qualified to do this job, um, who am I to do this? When you ask the first question, is it true? More often than not, it's actually not true. Because
Hmm.
if you've been given the job, surely you have the qualifications or experience to actually do it. And the second question is it logical? If your employer hired you to do this, surely it is in their best interest to hire someone who is competent. It is irrational and illogical for an
Hmm.
employer to hire someone who is incompetent and not suitable for that job. So,
Yeah.
just those two questions, we haven't even gone to the third question, is it constructive? It already encourages you to have another perspective. If you've been holding on to these thoughts for so long. For me, with my work as a psychologist and as a coach, I've seen this all the time, with my clients, that they are holding on to these limiting beliefs, these inner critic messages. And because they've been holding on to it for so long, they hold it to be true. It's almost like they've internalized these messages as true. And it takes an external person, a coach, a mentor, a friend, or what have you, to actually poke you a little bit,
Yeah.
shake you sometimes, and say, I'm not sure that's true. Where's your evidence? Where is this coming from? Because you have to explore it. So, three questions: is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive?
Right.
Now, one of the reasons why I ask you to ask these questions is because sometimes it might be true, right?
Yeah.
We've touched on this point earlier, that you might be given a new task
Mhm.
and you get scared. It's like, ooh, I'm not sure if I can do this. I don't know enough. I know something about it, but I don't know enough about it.
Mm.
So you ask the first question, is it true? Yes, it's probably true. In terms of, sometimes it happens. You don't need to know everything. But the second question, is it logical? Just because you don't know this right now, it doesn't mean that you cannot figure it out. It doesn't
Yeah.
make you a fraud. It just means that you don't know it right now. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So the next question is it constructive? You have to find a way to use this thought and encourage yourself to grow and develop. So if you find that there are some gaps in your knowledge, if there are some gaps in your skill, ask, how can I make this right? Who can I ask for support? What do I need to do to learn this? So the inner critic message is not necessarily paralyzing you. It's not stopping you from taking opportunities that will enable you to grow, but instead it's encouraging you to actually embrace these opportunities. If there are things that you don't know yet, then this is your chance to actually gain a new skill, or learn something new. It doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily make you a fraud. It just means that you are learning and growing and developing, and then that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, amazing. I love it. It's called the TLC principle. It's called, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? And at any
That's
point,
right.
if you get stuck on one, you kind of say, okay, but I can do something about it, rather than saying, okay, no, I'm an imposter and therefore I have to keep all the
That's
value that I
right.
offer to the world to myself. And okay, amazing. I love it.
Yeah, that's actually what I usually do with my clients. And what I find fascinating is that when I teach them the TLC questioning sequence, and when I apply it to them, it's like there's a light bulb moment. And
Mm,
it for them, the way they express it, it feels as if there's like a burden off their shoulders. And for the 6 weeks that we go through it, I follow them up over a 6 week period. They will say something like, I find myself applying the TLC questioning sequence, and it encourages them to embrace more opportunities, because it's actually okay, even if you are feeling incompetent, or if you're feeling as if you're not good enough. You ask the question, is it true that you're not good enough? Sometimes, because of their self-doubt, they would say
mm,
yes. But the next question is it logical? Just because you're feeling this way doesn't necessarily make you a fraud. And the third question is it constructive? What can you do to make it better? What can you do to use this thought so you can improve yourself and get better? And for them, it actually feels liberating. It takes the load off their shoulders, because they recognize that they are not frauds. They recognize that they are at a certain stage in their career. It's okay to learn, and actually it's also okay to learn from others, because one of the limiting beliefs that I've noticed that I've seen with my clients is that they would say something like, I know that I'm not good enough because my colleagues are doing better. Right? So I asked them the first question, is it true that your colleagues are doing better? And they would say, yeah, this is what I can see. And I would ask, do you have evidence? Are you being compared using a particular metric, and shows that the ranking that they're actually doing better? And they would say something like, actually, no, we don't have that, but it's just my observation. So I say, okay, let's assume that you are correct, that your colleagues are doing better than you. The second question is it logical? Just because they are doing better, does that mean that you are a fraud? Doesn't really make sense for their performance to be a reflection of yours, because your performance
Yeah.
is your performance, their performance is their performance. So how is it?
Yeah.
It doesn't
You
really
can't
make sense.
really quantify everything. And even if we did have a scale, it's just that.
Different
Someone's
context
perception
as
of a
well.
scale.
That's right. And what I find is that for a lot of, for example, online entrepreneurs, I see this all the time with online
Mm.
entrepreneurs who are my clients. They would start their journey now. They're 6 months into their online career, and they compare themselves to Marie Forleo, and
Oh
and you know
yeah.
to Gabby Bernstein, and
Yeah.
to all those people who have been doing this for like what, 10 years.
Probably
They're,
more.
they're, they're making
Yeah.
seven figures. It was like, what am
Yeah.
I doing wrong? And the thing is, it's not logical to compare yourself to someone who's been on it for many years when you are just starting,
Yeah,
right?
and
So
also who have probably made an active decision to say, yeah, I want to have a seven-figure, eight-figure business, as opposed to, well, you know what, a six-figure income is enough for me, and I value other parts of my life as well. So I see this so many times with so many other entrepreneurs as well, that yeah, they'd be like, oh my God, Mary Folio, classic example.
yeah, I'm a failure. Their success is not a reflection of your failure. And actually, even if you are not achieving the level of success that you are hoping for, the next question is it constructive? You
Mm,
are at this point right now. How does telling yourself that you are a failure help you in any way? You have to flip the switch here and ask, okay, I'm not achieving the results that I'm hoping for. What can I do? And if there are people who are doing better than me, I recognize that, and realize that there are some things that you can learn from them. First of all, some of their results might be airbrushed. I'm not saying that they are lying,
yeah.
but there are things that you don't know. They might be making a six-figure launch. They're making six figures in 2 weeks, for example, but you don't know the overheads.
Or
You don't know how much
exactly,
you
yeah.
don't know how much they are spending on ads. You don't know how many staff they have helping them out to run this
Yeah.
business. So even if you can see the results in this way, you don't see the big picture. It's almost like looking at a swan on a lake. You can see
Yeah.
how graceful it is. It's like, oh, beautiful, but you
Can't see
cannot
how
really see the legs.
yeah,
You
yeah,
cannot
yeah.
see all
Love
the
that.
work that's been going on to achieve that. So if you want to achieve those results, maybe you need to learn how they do it. And if you realize that it's actually a lot of hard work, that they didn't just get lucky,
Yeah.
that you're telling yourself, I'm just so awful, I'm unlucky, I'm just a failure. Actually, no, flip it. Ask the third question, is it constructive? How is feeling this way helping you in any way? And if you want to learn from others, go ahead and learn, but that doesn't really reflect that you are that you are a failure. It just means that you are learning, you are growing. The context is different. You have different circumstances,
Yeah.
different budget sizes, if you like. different support staff. And so you can't really compare, but
Mm.
ask the questions. Is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? That will actually elevate you a little bit more, and not to be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, I love this, and it's almost brings me back to one of the uh, scripts that I have created for myself. Choose your heroes mindfully. So while I can choose Merifolio as my hero or someone else, without knowing the other parts of their life, it's very wrong for me to do that. Well, not wrong, but it's almost a lopsided way of looking at things, and then I end up comparing myself to this goddess-like image, while I don't see the other bits that she puts in.
Yeah.
um, yeah, completely with you on that. Amazing, I
So
love it.
yeah, that's actually one of the strategies that I teach. There is another one that is a lot simpler, and
Mm-hmm.
this is what I do with my author clients. So the TLC technique, usually I use that technique with one-to-one clients. Professionals who are starting at their careers, or actually even if they've been in their careers for so long and they still feel as if they're not good enough. We go through the TLC questioning sequence because it actually puts it into context. But when I work with my students, for example, who are aspiring authors, there are so many of them. I have like 35 students helping to write their books and publish their books. I couldn't really go through the TLC questioning sequence with them in so much detail because it's quite hard to do 35,
35.
to help 35 students at the same time. So what I do, the quickest way that I do this is I teach them the flashlight technique. So most of them, the common limiting belief that they have is they're not good enough, that they're not expert enough to write a book, that they don't have the enough knowledge. Like, who do you think I they think like, I don't know enough, that I'm not expert enough. Why would people even read my book? Who am I to write something? So they have that limiting belief, that prevents them from progressing with their book. So what I do is I teach them the flashlight technique, and how this works is I ask them to imagine that they are holding a flashlight, and the flashlight can only flash the light in one direction at a time. Either you flash the light on yourself, or you flash the light out. Now, when you flash the light onto yourself and you're feeling all these self-doubt and feelings of incompetence and so on, that's the only thing that you will see. You will focus on that and you will feel so bad about yourself. But what I would ask my students is that when they are feeling this way, they need to flash the light out and look
Mm.
at your audience, look at your readers. Who are you serving? Who's going to benefit if you actually wrote your book? Doesn't matter if you're feeling incompetent. It doesn't matter if you're feeling like a fraud. When you see that there are people who will benefit from hearing your message, from reading about your story or learning about your expertise, maybe they have a struggle right now, maybe they have a problem, and you know the solution.
Mm.
Even if you don't know everything about that topic,
Yeah.
that little nugget of knowledge that you have might be enough for that person to
Yeah.
ease their pain. You don't have the answers to everything. No one has the answers to everything.
Yeah.
But that little nugget of teeny tiny knowledge that you might have, you're holding on to it. It's unfair. If you
Yeah.
know that someone else will benefit from it, if it will ease their pain, if you can see your audience and know that you can serve them, it doesn't really matter if you're feeling self doubt. It doesn't matter if you're feeling incompetent. What matters is, even this little bit of information that you have, and you know that you can serve others even with that little bit, you're gonna do it. And for most of my students, that actually is enough. That
That's
actually works
amazing.
because it takes the spotlight off them. It
Mm.
doesn't matter if I'm feeling this way. What matters is I'm going to help you. I'll do whatever it takes to ease your pain, and especially for people who are passionate about their topic. So, for example, I have students who've experienced sexual abuse, and it took them so many years to get over that pain, and they
Mm.
know that telling their story can show others that they are not alone, that there is a way out, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I tell them, so why are you holding on to this? Why are you keeping it to yourself if you know that someone else will benefit from it? So it sort of helps them to overcome imposter
Yeah,
syndrome. It's really easy. It's really like a snap like that. Again, they feel that they can do it, even if they're not the best writers in the world. I would say it doesn't really matter. The editor is going to edit your book.
yeah,
Don't care about the grammar or the spelling or what have you.
yeah.
That's the editor's job. Your job is to share what you know, to share your knowledge, write your book, and get it out to the world, and serve your people.
Amazing. So tell us a bit more about your course. Where can people find it? How can people get in touch with you?
Yes. Well, we've mentioned earlier that my books are all available on Amazon. So
Yeah.
if you want to read about Imposter Syndrome Remedy, or Fear is Not My Enemy, or Change Your Life for Good, all of my books are available on Amazon on print, Kindle, and audiobook versions. But if you are interested in writing your own book, sharing your story, publishing it on Amazon, all of my students, actually, I have a 100% success rate in terms of getting all of my students to number one bestseller, because we follow a very specific launch strategy. I prepare them well for the launch. If you would like to know more about it, I have a free Facebook community called Self Publishing Made Simple. You can join there, and I do live Ask Me Anything Tuesdays there. And twice a year, I open the doors to my course. I have the 12-week Get It Done challenge, where we spend 12 weeks together. We take it a step at a time. We have weekly tasks,
Mhm.
weekly goals that I hold my students accountable to. And at the end of the 12 weeks, we launch your book, publish it, and reach number one bestseller on Amazon. The next cohort starts on the 24th of June. So if you are interested in that, come join us in the free Facebook community, the Self-Publishing Made Simple community, and all the details on how to register will be there. I'll have to screen you though, because if you're not ready to get it done, if you
Yeah.
like, I only take students who are ready to write your book. Actually, even if you don't know what you need to write yet, but if you have that feeling that, okay, I'm going to spend 12 weeks to pin down my topic, understand what my readers want, write that
Mhm.
book and publish it, you'll get in the 12-week challenge. But I'm quite selective who gets in. But all the details will be inside the Self-Publishing Made Simple Facebook community. Come join us, and get a feel of what it's like in our group.
Brilliant. So the self-publishing made simple Facebook group, you don't have a selection criteria for
Oh
there, do
no,
you?
no, no. Everybody's welcome.
No.
I do
Yeah.
have questions. Before you enter in, I'd like to know what's your passion? Have you started writing your book?
Yes.
Something like that. But just to give me an idea of how can I serve you? Because people
Yeah.
actually come in there at different stages of their
Mm.
publishing career, where some of them haven't got a clue how to get started. They even haven't got a topic yet. Others are already published and want to know a little bit more how to sell their books, how to market their books. Others have just finished writing their drafts and getting ready to launch. So, different stages. So, the entry questions is just it just gives me an idea of where you're at, so I can serve my audience better.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's self-publishing uh, for
Made
for
simple.
made simple,
Self-publishing made
made
simple.
simple on Facebook, and I'll link down the all the links
Yes.
for
Oh yeah, and you actually have the Get It Done challenge as well. So you can see the join the 12-week Get It Done challenge. Yeah, the next cohort starts on the 24th of June. We'll spend 12 weeks aiming to launch around September. So you'll be writing during the summer months.
Mhm.
And we'll spend 6 weeks planning and writing your book, and then the next 6 weeks will be preparing it for publication, organizing your cover, your editor, your launch team. And you have to follow the launch sequence to the letter. I'm quite strict about that,
Mm,
because I want all of my students to write a book that readers will love, but at the
mm,
same time a book that is visible, and that will get to number one bestseller. Because if you've written a book and you've poured your heart and soul and put in so much time, writing your book, I want your book in the hands of as many people as possible, because if it's going to serve them, I want the book out there instead of collecting e-dust online and
yeah.
just being there. So so I can get a little bit strict in terms of
Yeah.
how in terms of following the sequence, but that's why I call it the Get It Done challenge, because we take it one step at a time. Every week there are specific tasks. I hold my students accountable, and at the end of the 12 weeks, we launch and get your book to number one bestseller on Amazon. So, early bird registration is open now until the 1st of May. After that, it will be regular price. So, if you're interested now, you can make a commitment now, book your early bird slot, and I will reserve the space for you in time for the 24th of June launch.
Okay, brilliant. Great. Lovely having you, Emee. That was really, really insightful. And I'm so glad you joined us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope that was helpful.
That was extremely helpful. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you more often some other time.
That
Okay,
would be great. Thank you.
great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.